welcome everyone to the Omaha Mayor's Commission for Citizens with Disabilities meeting. I can't welcome our televised audience as we are in new digs temporarily. So we're going to be recording this, and so if you're watching this, you're watching a recorded version either from the website or wherever else it can be obtained. But I do want to welcome our guests, our members, our interpreter. Thank you for being here. Are we doing the 7 o'clock rebroadcasts? We are doing that.
We're trying to
do that. Our goal is to rebroadcast these each Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. on, I believe, channel 22 for Cox Communications. But videos of this meeting can also be viewed from the Disability Commission's website at www.cityofomaha.org. Click on the mayor's office and then click on Disabilities Commission. Very quickly, I want to run through kind of what we're here for. The main objective of the Mayor's Commission is, well, the central objectives are the main objective is to promote the quality of life, the community accessibility and equity in all aspects related to the city of Omaha on behalf of and in cooperation with the citizens who experience disabilities. To this end, the commission will advise the mayor, the city council, city department heads, and other city of Omaha personnel on issues of access, representation, employment, housing, quality of life, and other issues affecting city citizens with disabilities and their respective families. We work to serve as a resource for Omaha citizens with disabilities and their families to express concerns and resolve issues regarding those things that affect them in their daily lives. We work to publicize the role of the Mayor's Commission for citizens with disabilities and the resources available to assist them in terms of employment, housing, business, and we also try and reach out to folks that might have an impact, like business owners, engineers, architects, and others that have a role in bettering the lives of Omaha citizens. We work to promote awareness to the general public on the capabilities, needs, and desires of citizens with disabilities. We work to, on occasion, publicly recognize the efforts of employers, businesses, schools, organizations, and others who've demonstrated outstanding support of programs and services for persons with disabilities in Omaha. We serve to advocate for accessibility issues and implement plans and projects to improve services for citizens with disabilities. And we review and implement plans and projects for advocating services for citizens with disabilities. That was hard to say, but I think I got through it. Hopefully everyone understood me. I want to inform the audience that announcements will be made if we have a few minutes at the end of the meeting. So have a paper and pen handy ready to take notes, because there's always just a little gem in there. So at this point, I want to open this up to our members to introduce themselves. We have some members here and some members who are with us virtually as we continue to deal with the COVID pandemic and the fact that Omaha is still struggling with this. My name is, again, Mark Smith. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Monroe Meyer Institute, which is the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities for the state of Nebraska. And I've been there for a number of years, and I'm also the parent and sibling to adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So Nancy took the time to come here, so she gets to go next.
I'm Nancy Floral, and I'm with the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. And we serve individuals that are blind, visually impaired, and deafblind.
Thanks, Nancy. And on the screen, do you want me just to call you guys out? I could do that. Stephanie?
Hi, I'm Stephanie Scavdall. I'm with Outlook Nebraska. We provide employment opportunities and enrichment opportunities to those who are blind and visually impaired.
Thanks, Steph. And Eric? I think Eric.
Eric's still there.
Let's go to Megan and we'll come back to Eric.
Hi, Megan Walls. My company, Assistology, focuses on helping remove barriers to accessibility and promote inclusion across the lifespan and all environments. So I'm here representing the interests of the greater disability community.
And Rachel?
Yes, my name is Rachel Johnson. I worked for 6 years with individuals with brain injuries and spinal cord injuries. I currently work with individuals with developmental disabilities, and I live with a spinal cord injury as well. So I try to help advocate for the needs of those populations.
Thank you. And Eric, do you introduce yourself?
I'm Eric Olson. I live with spinal cord injury myself. I'm just an average citizen, expressing concerns and bringing awareness to some of the things that I'd like to see changed or improved in our city.
Thank you, Eric. And we have one visitor, Emily Costello.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Costello, and I am a intern with the UCID, so the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. I work with Mark at MMI, and I'm also a sibling to a brother with an intellectual disability.
Yeah, and as you might gather, Monroe Meyer really focuses on issues of intellectual and developmental disabilities primarily, although we do have services and supports for a broad range of disabilities. So we're really cross disability, but the program that Emily was describing, that's our main focus. So I do want to comment just kind of for the record, we're still having to go, well, this is the least virtual we've been in about a year because we have two of us here, which is a good thing. But so during this period of time, we have not been able to have formal agenda or minutes because we don't have a quorum present. Hopefully that will change sooner than later, but safety first, guys. And I don't work too far from here, so it's easy for me to get here. And I appreciate Nancy being here today. So as I say, we did not have a quorum and there were no minutes to approve. We haven't had approvable minutes since I think of February or March of last year, but so it goes in the real world. We have a presenter for today, Keith Station, who's the Deputy Chief of Staff for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the City of Omaha Mayor's Office. The presentation this month was really looking at housing, and actually Keith is formerly worked at Heartland Workforce Solutions, which that's not housing, but irrespective.
No, it was working with the chamber, talking about
Thank you.
inclusion and diversity in the city of Omaha. And how are we all working together to have a fully inclusive community?
I am so glad you were here, Nancy, because I just didn't write very good notes.
That's okay.
But
We did have housing at one point in time and we moved it around.
we had a big discussion right before we came on the air on who's on first and et cetera, et cetera. But we'll have Keith here this month, and then next month we'll have a presentation from Metro Area Transit on their work towards accessible transportation. So at this point, I want to turn it over to Keith, who I think grew up about 2 blocks from me, or maybe 3, to talk a little bit about his role and his efforts in terms of assuring a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community in Omaha.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks for the invitation, everyone. Thank you, Nancy. I'm gonna maybe slide up so I can see.
Give Jamie
And
a
then
second.
you want to do next slide, or you a minute?
You can do it. I just want to make sure that Jamie's caught up.
Okay.
Jamie, are you good? We're good.
Okay. So again, thank you for having me. Just a few, the cameras here, just a few things. As Mark said on Key Station, I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is month 7 for me. I want to thank my colleague, Kat Coleman, for just being awesome in all the ways, and for the Oreos that she brought me. I want to acknowledge Nancy. Y'all don't know this, or maybe you do by now, but Nancy is kind of one of my former bosses at my last job. She's on the board of directors for Heart and Workforce Solutions. So I wore a tie, especially for the day, Nancy, because I knew Nancy would be here. And so I wanted to impress her. So I'm going to try to be articulate and make my points here. Also, some of the things I'm going to talk about, y'all will know probably better than most. But I want to make sure I still hit on some of the things that kind of contextualize the work we're doing. So bear with me. And also, I'm not afraid to say that when we get to the Q&A time, I'm not afraid to say I don't know, or we haven't thought about that yet, or I'd welcome your thoughts on that. So you might hear that, because we're building out some of the things that we can do. I'm going to go off on a few tangents, and so even though my comments will be tangential, I'll bring it back. I promise to stay with me. Please laugh at my jokes and nod along like you agree until I get to the end. Then you tell me that you don't agree, or that is baloney. Help me on time, Kat. I want to make sure that I don't talk for too long, and so that we have time to discuss, or if y'all have other things that you want to address. So what time do you want me to go till, Mark? What time do you want me to stop talking?
We will go till 4:30. So,
Okay.
But please don't feel like you need to fill every second up.
Okay.
And we usually do like to have a few minutes for Q&A.
Okay.
By 4:15-ish or so, 4:20. 4:15.
That's a long time, Nancy.
No,
Okay. All right.
4:15. Okay, I'll back it up.
Okay.
4:10.
And y'all can hear me okay? Do I need to talk louder, or am I good to go on the volume?
You're good.
Okay. So next slide, please. I got it. Too quick about me. Again, I'm from here, born and raised, Central High School, University of Nebraska, Lincoln, Indiana University. When I left grad school in Indiana, I went to Orlando and then Dallas. I've been back here for 10 years now. So I'm what you call it, what the city calls a boomerang, right? Or what everybody calls a boomerang when you come back home. When I started, prior to starting here in September, I was at Heartland Workforce Solutions for the last 4.5 years, close to 5 years. I sort of served as the chief business strategist for that organization. We worked to help high demand, high skill, high wage industry sectors connect to talent. And I was appointed by the mayor this summer, and again started just after Labor Day of last year. When this press release came out, here's y'all looking at my job description right now. When this press release came out, these are the things that we were to set out to accomplish initially. When the mayor and I talked about this role and what it should look like, these were the things that were her priorities, and they were to develop. And I'll talk more about this as we go on. To name and develop a community advisory board for diversity, equity, and inclusion, to name and develop a city employee advisory board comprised of incumbent workers, develop a strategic plan for diversity and inclusion in city government. So that's more so internally, more than for the community. Expand diverse representation on city boards and commissions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, of which this is one. Expand racial diversity in all departments, including police and fire. And if you all know that for the mayor, that public safety is especially important to her. So she saw it as a priority and a really timely opportunity to strategize on how we can expand racial diversity in those in the law enforcement and fire and rescue. And then also, this was talked about in the media quite a bit. The mayor mentioned that she would create bias training for all city employees, and I'll put some context toward that last one too. So those two green checks are there because we did those two things. We named individuals for those boards. So those two advisory boards joins this one as I think maybe board and commission number 67 and 68, something like that, of these boards and commissions. My goal is to make sure that these boards are valuable and are useful for the mayor. So essentially my job is to advise the mayor on issues related to diversity and inclusion and offer my perspective and bring the bag of experience and associations that I came here with. I told the mayor that I committed to bringing value with those things, some of the boards that I've had a chance to be a part of, some of the community collaboratives I've had a chance to sit at, and hopefully it'll be useful for the city. I like to show this one because maybe y'all know this or would have assumed this, but LinkedIn published this a little while ago, so I stole this, snipped it, borrowed it. In 2020, the #1 C-suite position was Chief Diversity Officer. And that probably won't surprise you, but I thought that was interesting, right above Chief Growth Officer and Chief Underwriting Officer. So in 2020, in the calendar year 2020, 84% of Chief C-suite, Chief blank officers were a Chief Diversity Officer of some sort. And that's pretty telling. That means that this country, that means the industry, that means that government, that means that sports franchises, organizations at all levels are concerned with leadership in the area of diversity and inclusion. That's a good thing, most could argue, but it's also symptomatic of an issue that our society, our country, our communities need to deal with. Again, objectives from our role, these were in those bullets, but there's a few more on here I just want to touch on. So that first bullet there, and I talked to the mayor about this as important even before I started. There needs to be kind of a delineation between the internal and external objectives of my role. The mayor did not hire me to be the cultural police for the city, and nor am I now the external spokesperson for the city or for the mayor for diversity and inclusion. The purpose of my role was to more so be strategic in how we, from the inside out, so among the ranks of city government, how can we look at developing a strategic plan for diversity and inclusion, and how can we create an environment and an employment brand that welcomes diverse talent into the city of Omaha. As I'm sure you all know, affirmative action is banned in the state of Nebraska. So we have to be mindful and careful and legal about how we attract talent if we want to expand racial diversity. In this state, we can't exclude people. We hire the best people. But we also have an opportunity to build out our organizations and our teams and our boards and with representation, especially in situations where you can have a staff or a board or a person that reflects the constituency of the customer base or the community that they're serving. That's critical there. So we talked about that. And then also developing a strategic plan for diversity and inclusion. If I went back for a second, how do I go back? I want to make a point that so the bullet number 3 and 4 are items that I've asked the community board to assist with. Items number 5 and 6, I've asked the city employee advisory board to assist with. That's important because the way that these boards are comprised of, the community board has members from all or 6 of the 7 city council districts, with the exception of District 4. We didn't have applicants from District 4. And that might be an issue. I think that we have an opportunity, and in District 4, as you know, is more Southeast Omaha. We have an opportunity to make sure that there's more engagement in Southeast Omaha for community members to participate in civic leadership opportunities like this. So we have community members from 6 of the 7 districts, and then we also welcomed a representative from 5 additional existing boards. So in addition to 6 individuals from the community at large, we have an individual from Human Rights Relations Board. We have an individual from the Omaha Public Libraries Board. We have an individual from the Millennials Advisory Board. we have an individual from the Native American Advisory Board, and we have a person from the LGBTQ plus. Thank you, Kat. See, I told y'all Kat's like, but you already know that Kat is on. So the board is comprised of the community members plus those 5 people. And so we have a handful of folks that serve a dual role. And that was by design, because there needs to be, again, we have over 60 boards and commissions. There needs to be some integration and some collaboration and not silos amongst this work. And that's why I was glad to get here today, because I'd like to engage with this group more as well. So this was by design, right, Nancy? This was not
Right. It was all
accidental.
planned.
I wasn't an afterthought.
No,
I'm
not
not
at
filling in
all.
for the chamber. This is how it was supposed to.
We're really happy to have you, Keith.
I appreciate it, Mark. I
Oh,
am
good.
happy to be here. Additional objectives. I quickly saw that it was important to collaborate with the Human Resources Department and the Human Rights and Relations Department. So if Human Resources deals with human capital and issues related to HR, and our Human Rights and Relations Department deals with investigating issues related to public accommodation, employment and housing, and economic equity inclusion program, and many other things. It would be important for me to find a way to not impede or duplicate the efforts of human resources, human rights and relations, but more so complement those efforts. So I've kind of tried to wedge myself in between those 2 departments. And I'll show you the Venn diagram in my mind that makes sense for me to kind of occupy a sweet spot. I also saw it was pretty apparent to me that we needed to align with existing initiatives and other and momentum such as code, such as the chamber. So I've incorporated that into what I'm talking about today, Nancy, because I am not Bianca Harley. I probably sound bitter about that. I don't at all. I'm really not. Bianca's a friend, and I love the chamber, and they're doing great work, and so it's a good thing. And also, I want to encourage respectful, responsible conversations about diversity and inclusion. I think that we have allowed. This is Key Station's opinion. I think we've allowed people in spaces, in places, while we're discussing diversity and inclusion, to be intellectually dishonest about what's really going on. And unfortunately, what I realized from working in places and being from this community and working in nonprofit and working with the private sector, that when you allow that, when you do that, when you don't have respectful, responsible conversations, and the conversation goes way over here, and we're really not solving issues. We're not asking smart questions like Megan asked earlier and said, okay, how can we make sure that our MO to address these issues is not an afterthought or reactionary, but more proactive and equitable? Like questions like that are get things done, not arguing about stuff or, beating on the table or getting into a culture wars. And I can spot it a mile away when it happens. And so what ends up happening is that institutions, and I'm very mindful of where the city is in all this, but institutions that have persisted for a long time don't have a choice but to allow status quo, because conversations and arguments and debates are happening over here and they're not productive. And so we just gonna keep cooking in the way we're going, because what do we do with all this stuff, right? So how do we take the stuff that's important, that gets jumbled up, that gets lost, that gets discussed without the proper context? How do we pull that into getting things done and being proactive and being productive and measuring what we do in a time-bound fashion? That's what I want to bring with the assistance of my coworkers and the community.
And like Rachel said, put action behind it.
That's right. And ask those questions. Be people to ask questions. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? And how do we? Who's going to do it? And how do we know it gets done? Again, I talked about expanding racial diversity in all departments, including public safety. And then that last one I put in there because I asked the mayor, she mentioned that there would be mandatory bias training. I asked the mayor to reframe that. And I said, let's talk about it as a opportunity to learn and position it as a value prop or a perk, an opportunity, because it's not a punishment. Learning about your implicit bias and learning about diversity and inclusion is a professional development opportunity, as well as it ultimately, hopefully, improves the experience of the citizens who we work on behalf of. That might sound lofty, that might sound soapboxy, but I really think it's important to remember that. I'm sure we all work for organizations that value professional development and invest in that. There are lots of folks who wish that their company would give them an afternoon off to do a training, or wish that they had a budget to go to a conference, or wish that they had an organization that just saw value in pouring into their employees. And the city has done that. So I asked the mayor, I said, Mayor, this is an opportunity. This is something that we want to, it's not an arm twist. Let's frame this as city employees get better and get to know more and get to create more of a work environment where we value each other. And again, ultimately the citizens in our city. So here's that page. We all know this page, right? Because we visit it often just to brush up on all the boards and commissions. When you go to this link at the top, you see the quick instructions on how you find out more about these committees, and you click on them, it kind of expands and you see all your names and all the people who are on the various committees. And you see what to do if you're interested. You can email or write, and there's lots of them, as you can see. I don't even think as a matter of fact, I know they're not all on there at the moment, and we're working on that. Excuse me, but there's lots, and they vary in terms of their purpose and mission. There are some that are created by executive order. There are some that are informed by city ordinance. There are some that are required to be in existence by state mandate and such. And so we see a cool opportunity to invite more voices and more people and more thought and more experience to these boards and commissions. That's the goal. And so what I am trying to do with the help of the community group is to how can we promote this better? Because that'll do two things, we think. It will welcome more diverse representation on these boards and commissions, and it'll also just encourage people to hopefully see the importance of just civic engagement. And because we need both of those things. Sometimes the representatives on these committees are by default, they are ex officio. Because you work for an organization in this role, that means you need to be on this board. That is what it is. But in those cases where we can welcome members at large, or we can find strategic ways to involve people that represent initiatives, unique organizations or collaboratives, then we should do that. So we are developing a campaign to just welcome more inquiries and questions and information about all these boards and commissions. So this is unofficial. This is just a Venn diagram for my simple thought process here. I saw when I started to chart out some of the things I would be working on, I saw the need for the community board, the employee board, and the Human Rights and Relations board, and I'm speaking of the board, not the department necessarily, needing to be aligned. That blurb at the bottom there is the HR&R, a snippet of their mission and purpose, and those two blurbs at the top there. So the employee diversity inclusion advisory board has officially revised their mission and vision statement to be that. The one on the left there, the community diversity and inclusion advisory board, has not revised that just yet. But in essence, it is intended to engage community members to advise the mayor on matters related to diversity and inclusion. The committee collaborates to help the city develop and refine a strategic plan for diversity and inclusion. And then the employee diversity advisory board is the vision is to help foster and slide that over, Kat, if you would. Oh, I got the mouse. Never mind. I can do it, right? I'm just sliding your faces over so that I can read this. Our vision is to develop, foster, and sustain an inclusive, diverse culture in city government by recognizing the past, present, and future implications of systematic inequalities, and strive to create a professional culture in which these realities are acknowledged and improved upon. We seek to elevate oppressed voices in the city of Omaha by providing resources that promote equal access and opportunity for all employees in order to achieve a prosperous society. And we advocate for policies that promote diversity and inclusion in the city of Omaha workforce. So that was recently approved by that group. Just an item of note: the the employee group decided that they wanted to be more structured. So they have a
Do me a favor and collapse the,
the people.
yep, Jamie's having an issue. Our interpreter can't see.
Oh, this one.
Yep, if you could move that like down to the corner.
Okay.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll be better for her. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
We don't have, but she's not on,
Huh?
but she's not on the screen.
She's on
the Zoom meeting.
Zoom.
Okay.
She's still here. She just couldn't, she said the PowerPoint is too big. She couldn't see.
Okay.
Hopefully that'll help.
All right. And so the employee group has a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And however, in contrast, the community group wanted to keep it flat and open. And that's cool too. That's totally fine. And both groups, and this is a good thing, both groups really felt like that was the best way for each of those. And so we welcome those. So I offer more leadership to the community group. And on the employee group, I am more like one of the participants. And that's cool. And then with the Human Rights Relations Board, that group's leadership has been kind enough to invite me to the meetings in a way where I'm in listening mode and also making sure that we can collaborate in both directions. So Angie Balserini, that's her name, right? Who works for Film Streams, is the Human Rights and Relations Board member who also is a representative on the Employee Diversity and Inclusion Equity Advisory Board for the mayor. So Angie's doing double duty. The city employee advisory members that I talked about, these folks' names aren't as important for this slide more than I wanted to show you the diversity in all the departments. The good news is that we have representation from all the key departments in the city who are on that board. And those departments are Human Rights Relations, the Legal Department, Parks and Recreations Department, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Omaha Public Libraries, Omaha Police Department has a couple of people, Parks and Recreation, City Planning Department, again, Human Resources, and we have a captain in the Fire Department. And again, and I need to update this because that's Captain Sheree Thomas now, captain in the fire or in the police department. And we have a finance department representative and also public works representation. So when we talked about, these are some things this is a Wallet Hub report. When I talked to the mayor about some of the things that sort of are striking tidbits of information when we're looking at Omaha and how inclusive it is and isn't. That first bullet says companies that are more ethnically diverse are 35% more profitable. And I want to point out that that's a common refrain when discussing diversity and inclusion. We have to be careful there because diversity and inclusion is more important than just the bottom line. It doesn't have to be either or. It doesn't. If you run into people who don't have a bleeding heart for diversity and inclusion, you don't have to just say, well, it's good for business. So it is good for business, but it also is the right thing to do. Again, especially when you are representing diverse communities and diverse populations amongst your constituents or community members or customers. Being an inclusive city means that we do the things and pull the levers and take action to retain our 18 to 34-year-old population. That's not to say that individuals beyond the age of 34 are not as important, but for the vibrancy of our future, we have to think about what we can do to retain that demographic in Nebraska and also attract people to the area of that demographic. Nebraska, the state was ranked 10th worst in out-migration for people 25 and older with at least a bachelor's degree. Again, that speaks to that retention issue, that brain drain. I think that's a term that we always say, right? Here's one. Omaha ranks 220th overall and 52nd among large cities in terms of ethnic diversity. That's pretty striking. And And then the next one sort of piggybacks off that. And even within those poor rankings, we are pretty segregated, as I'm sure we all know. Omaha ranks, the last one there, Omaha ranks 93rd out of 100 largest metros in earnings gap between Caucasians and people of color. That's another one that really speaks to what can we do to have more equity in that conversation about earnings. I point out with that too. Sometimes when we're discussing equity and equality and diversity and inclusion and culture and belonging and such, people, thank you. People think about equity as I read an article that said equity is not Robin Hooding. That was helpful for me to contextualize how to think about equity. Sometimes people think that creating a more equitable environment for communities and for organizations means taking from one area and giving to another, and that's not the right way to think about it. Equity is more so taking into consideration some of the issues and circumstances and historical implications that have made inequitable environments and making adjustments with those things in mind. So that's important to think about when you're talking about pay, and not even just with ethnicity, but also among gender and other categories. So the first 6 months, we have had a chance to do is align with other boards and commissions. I met with all the city council members several times to discuss what are their priorities in their respective districts. I've done some presentations to affiliated groups, boards, and coalitions. I've been on a listening tour at meetings and department meetings of all kinds and community meetings as well. I've had a chance to be a part of some of the public safety recruitment strategies with police and fire. I've established a really good rapport with the chief of fire and chief of police. They've been great in welcoming me in. I've had a chance to help to interview for the parks director position and for the deputy chief police position. And it's been great. I've asked the mayor to again sign on to support the code initiative and the CEO statements for the we will statements. The mayor has always been in support of the code initiative, but I asked her to consider signing on to code as the city of Omaha, the large employer, not just as the chief elected official of the city. And so she was down with that, and that's a good thing. What this work often tells you and what the code initiative reinforces is that to have a measurable impact in organizations, you have to have a visible leadership from the top. You can't just hire a Keith Station and say, we did that, we got a diversity person and we got some language around what we're going to do, all is well. The mayor understands that she's got to be out front on some of this stuff to encourage other city leaders to embrace diversity inclusion, and not as a favor, but because it's the right thing to do and it's necessary, and now's the time, and it's effective, and it helps us to retain the best and brightest workers in the city. So we did it. So we got the CEO pledge and the we will statements. We are in the process of adopting articulation statements so that we are communicating clearly on what we're doing. There's a lot of stuff happening, but we need to have a unified way that we convey that. We've asked, we're in the process of also asking city department leaders to get on board. There's a lot of divisions / departments in the city that have their own leaders, and diversity and inclusion is everybody's job. It's not, I can't make people do stuff. I can wield the power of the mayor to invite people to have a more inclusive cultures on their departments, but it's really an opportunity to bring some consistency to how respective department leaders are leading and championing diversity and inclusion. And then also one thing that we will do is develop, here's the code initiative link. And here's the statements. I will, for the interest of time, maybe I'll just make sure that this presentation is included and the links are available so people can see it. And you did send it to me and I could share it. Okay. So the we will statements from code. So back in June of last year, 150 CEOs stepped up to sign on to support these statements. It says we will educate ourselves, we will create opportunities, we will support, lift up, and collaborate. We will use our influence and our position to amplify unheard voices. We will improve the employment, training, and advancement, support, and success of people of color in our workforce. And we'll continue the conversation by engaging in ongoing CEOs for Code meetings. And so the mayor has got these on her schedule. So she'll be at the CEOs for Code meetings when she can make it. And then there's also the employer coalition part that I represent. So there are CEOs for Code, and there's the employer coalition that people who are hired in my role and my counterparts participate in. Another item that looks like collaboration, interdepartmental collaboration, is the reading of this book called The Color of Law. Color of Law is a book written by Richard Rothstein. It's a great book. The subtitle is A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. And it's a hard-hitting reading, and it really speaks to expanding on how the government systematically use legislation and policy to segregate our country and to bring intentional inequality to neighborhoods across the country. It's a good read. And so the Human Rights and Relations Board is reading it, and then both of the committees that I liaise with are reading it as well. In fact, on March 21st, we are going to have a, what did I say?
March.
Right. On May 21st of 2021, we're going to have a book review get together and talk about our findings and ask some pointed questions on what the book has taught us. So that kind of baseline understanding that we'll have throughout the various committees, I think will be useful for offering some perspective on how we move forward and what we know related to policy and legislation that affects equity in communities. And then ERGs, employee resource groups, are voluntary employee-led groups that foster a diverse, inclusive workplace aligned with organizational mission, values, and goals, business practices, and objectives. We have currently, I think we have only 3 official employee resource groups, and they're all related in public safety. We have a Black Professional Firefighters Association. We have the Black Police Officers Association and the Latino Police or Peace Officers Association. And those are the 3 employee resource groups. We don't have any formalized groups beyond that. And in my mind, that was low hanging fruit. There's lots of data and there's lots of organizations that have employee resource groups that are great for networking. They're great for mentoring. And the data shows that employees that are part of resource groups in all types of organizations are more engaged and are retained and stay longer and have a higher likelihood to be promoted. The vision that we have for incorporating employee resource groups into city government are that they would be interdepartmental. So the Convention and Visitors Bureau wouldn't have their own, and the library wouldn't have their own. All city departments would be welcome. And we would also think about allyship in them too. So allyship being if you're not a member of the constituent focus area, that you will be welcomed as well. We would just make sure that there's an environment of mindfulness that if you are part of a group that does not apply to your life or work or lived experience, that you be mindful that the focus remain on the constituent. Examples of ERGs, they're all types, but these are some of the ones that we have talked about and thought about for city government, LGBTQ employee resource. And again, these are comprised of people that work for the city in one department or another. Black employee resource groups, empowering employees with disabilities employee resource group, and many others. And they don't have to be structured with race or ability. They can be for people who are parents or people who commute to work, all young professionals, all types of employee resource groups. The advice is you go with a coalition of willing, go with people who show up and who are interested, but promote them to as many employees as possible. And the thought being that when you talk about culture and belonging in the workplace, that will help amongst departments. There are people that work for the city that have no idea what other people and other departments do, and we need more of that. And also what we know is that we have the good problem, and this is where Nancy and her expertise comes in. We know we have the good problem of low unemployment in this community, And so we need to be creative about how we attract talent. And we know that the best attraction strategy is to have satisfied, engaged employees that will invite other people to work for your organization. So that's an item that the city employee group will help to activate. This is my contact information. And this is just kind of scratching the surface on the things that we are thinking about, talking about, and have taken action on. Again, I think I said this earlier, but diversity inclusion is everybody's job. I want to just underscore that. It is not, you don't hire a person like me to come in and just and make sure that everybody's doing it. I think what I can bring is inviting people to a culture at the city that welcomes diverse perspectives, lifestyles, experiences, and harness that so that the city of Omaha as an employer is better off. That is the objective. So much work to be done, many loads to lift, and we are. I'm excited about I don't know if I should say this. I'm excited about the election coming close to being to an end, because then politics aren't at play as much as they are now, so we can really continue cooking. And I would again, as I said earlier, I welcome some collaboration from this group as well when we think about holistically what does diversity inclusion mean and why is it valuable. I'm gonna stop talking and answer questions that you might have. Thank y'all for letting me come.
Thank you, Keith. Questions from the group?
Hey Keith, that was really like appreciated in depth of like the intricacies that go on behind closed doors and behind the scenes that with the city that I had no idea. And I'm also just a boomerang. I left for 13 years, so I can appreciate your journey. I tend to be one of the ones to ask hard questions, so don't take offense. It's just what I do. A couple of things that popped into mind as you were talking, and in working with employers, and as you partner with the chamber and look for opportunities to increase inclusion in the workforce and retain. Is there anything you can speak to about how the city is working to support employers as well as help employees navigate opportunities? And I should preface this by saying my lens in all these questions is with respect to the disability community. So, in terms of resources for employers to tap into for recruiting and hiring, but also avenues and portals for employees to look towards, for all these different opportunities within government agencies and departments.
Sure. That is a great question, Megan, and that is a hard question, as you prefaced. So thank you for the warning. That's a good question. How can the city support employers? I think that the first thing that we ought to do is to help champion the message. I think that while that may sound like it's not as impactful, I think it's a powerful thing to do. The good news is that in this community, and Megan, we have some executive leaders who are out front, who are trailblazing, who are boldly saying, this is what we will do. I think one of the things that the mayor has agreed to do that helps do that is to participate in the scorecards that are out there. There's a couple scorecards that we will participate in. There's the one that the Code Initiative will ask us to do. And then the Empowerment Network has a scorecard that is that encourages employers to share their progress publicly. And so what that will do is take an assessment of how we are doing in categories of how diverse we are or aren't, and show how we are improving over time. And what that does is hold us accountable. So I think the thing to do is to be willing to be held accountable. I think that we can help employees by making sure that, and again, I'm going to give a key station opinion. I mean this respectfully. I think that we can create a better perception of that municipal workers and city workers can welcome dynamic people and talent. I think that there's a sense of people that work for city government. It's kind of mundane. You come to work and do your job and go home. And I think we don't have an employment brand that welcomes dynamic perspective and innovation and energy and ways that we can sort of change the game in the ways that we operate as a business. I think that is missing, Megan, and respectfully, again, and I have to say that I'm one of them. I'm a city worker, and so I reflect that. But I think we can welcome diverse talent, innovative thoughts and processes, and we can do more to make sure that when we're thinking about leadership, so leadership development. So we all know that sometimes, unfortunately, people are put into leadership positions because they're good performers, not because they're good leaders of people or good managers of people. And so I think that's a thing we can do, is to be mindful that the ascension in the ranks of leadership at the city should include people who have been invested in and been prepared to be leaders of departments and people. I think that's a really, again, blaring opportunity to me. And those are some of the things that we can do to help employees be successful and stay, again, because we all know that the process of attracting, hiring, onboarding, and retaining people is wildly expensive. And so the more we can do to retain good people, the better. And so I think adjusting our culture to be more welcoming to that is a thing. Also, I think that, and then I'll answer the resources question next. Shortly after I started here, it was funny. Several people reached out to me and said, Keith, we're glad you're here. I think you can do great work. You're a nice guy. But if you don't make sure that the environment is welcoming to diverse and inclusive people, then it's all for naught. People will come because you said this city of Omaha is a great place to work, and then they'll leave. They don't feel like there's a culture of belonging in the city. So don't cut off your nose by not working to make sure that the city's employment brand and the actual DNA of the city welcomes diverse talent, thoughts, perspectives, lived experiences. And so I think that that's what we can do. That's a thing we can do for employees, is to make sure that leaders understand that perspectives and people are welcome at the city. I think that the leadership can step up and be out front. And I think as far as resources, I think that, I was in the mayor's cabinet meeting today, and the grants department mentioned that they are welcoming more applications for awarding grants to community organizations. And to me, that's important, especially now as we are trying to come out of this pandemic. That's important because how can the city, and money isn't the solution to everything, but how can the city help to fund and support financially more initiatives and organizations that are doing work in the nonprofit space in this community? So kind of being a thrust to other organizations. The city is in the business of funding organizations because the city understands that agencies can do the work better than we can. So we try to scale and build capacity by uplifting other organizations instead of the city getting into the business of doing certain things. Pros and cons to that, certainly. But those are some of the things that I think the city has tried to do. And quite frankly, Megan, I don't know. I think we ought to ask the question of what's next. What can we do to go to the next level beyond those things that we have been doing or have adjusted? What's next? What does it look like now in 2021, coming out of a pandemic where the world is just different? What else can the city do? How can we learn from other cities? That's one thing I'm doing too, is I have a little R&D committee of comprised of one, where we're looking at other cities and seeing what are some smart things that other cities have done to address diversity and inclusion and to expand and change the game and lead the conversation.
I was just gonna add, because Megan jumped in a little bit before me, but I think one of the things is that you started, during your presentation talking about it. It's fine, there's key stations, but it's getting this, where you're creating as a city government, a culture that we're talking about, a change in our culture and our thinking. And so we were talking, you also shared there's like 150 employers or businesses that have signed on.
And now it's over 200.
Over 200. And I know after with COVID and everything, I think, you know, a lot of major businesses reached out from their diversity and inclusion officers, you know, to reach out to me. But then how does that filter? It's really important. It goes back to what you're saying, that it filters down, because it's fine if we're here, you know, with the mayor's office and the chiefs of staff and that, but those hiring supervisors, how do we make sure that those message and that same culture's there? Because that's true for the business world.
Yeah.
You know, the HR may fully buy into this, but then it's that direct line supervisor that's doing the hiring that hasn't been brought along. And so how are we teaming with, as a city, with those 200 business partners so that we're all on the same page?
Two things come to mind. I think the first thing that what the mayor has asked me to do is to, again, that the transparency on how we're trending is the thing. We're going to pull the curtain back and show how the city of Omaha is doing in terms of its diversity and amongst the ranks. The other thing we can do is invite, as I said earlier, other leaders to develop in their own departments their strategy. I'm not coming to the law department and saying you must do these things that champion diversity. It's asking leadership in the law department to say, what are you willing to do and be held accountable for, to be put to welcome diverse candidates and to engage with other departments that you typically don't. You might think, well, nobody has time to be meeting everybody in the city. There's over 3,000 employees in the city, but the spirit of inclusion and the culture of mentoring and understanding that the actions you take, even if you have a role that's not front facing, even if you have a role that doesn't engage directly with citizens, the actions you take, ultimately the citizens in the city will feel that. For example, safety is of the utmost importance in police and fire, right? So what the police and fire chiefs understand is that to put their firefighters and police officers in the most safe conditions, they have to have representatives that look like the communities that they're serving. So inspiring that kind of, those kinds of safety measures are important. Those are things that are actually being done. Partnering with human resources to make sure that and I got my workforce hat now, Nancy, making sure that where we post and how we invite people to apply and work for the city of Omaha is done in as many places as possible is part of it. And you know, Nancy, that we're seeing less and less applicants for job postings than we even 5 years ago. You're just seeing less. And that's partly due to, we need to continue with a strong attraction strategy, but we also have to make sure we are searching in the right places and promoting the opportunities in the right venues and through the right channels. And also the mayor is on record. The mayor supports affirmative action, at least going back to the unicameral, to the legislature, to be considered, so that citizens in the state of Nebraska can say whether we should have affirmative action or not. And so that's a good thing.
That is good.
So we'll see what happens, but it's going to take that too, in my opinion. I think it's going to take understanding that affirmative action opportunity will make a difference. So I think it's the short answer, Nancy, is it's cultural. I think we have to be transparent and accountable, and I think we have to draw the connection that maybe people don't see about how what you do affects the entire city, and how it helps us to not lose people to the city of Papillion. And we also know that, and I don't want to get into this, but we also know that the profession of law enforcement is kind of suffering right now, for a lot of different reasons. And so how can we understand that, embrace that, and make sure that we are still attracting law enforcement that reflects the communities that we're serving? So it takes all those things, I think. And the good news is that we don't have to be the first ones out there. There are lots of other cities, lots of other organizations and executives that have said that we are at an inflection point in our country and in these times, and we have to do things differently to have a different result in terms of how we attract people and retain people that work for the city.
I oftentimes think there's no point in reinventing the wheel if the wheel's there. Look at what models are there and what's gonna work
Absolutely.
best for us.
And there are lots. There are lots. In fact, the city employee advisory group meets on Wednesday of this week, and we're looking at a National League of Cities model for different bias trainings that they've done. So there are other cities that have municipal diversity training for city workers that already exist. We don't have one, but there are curriculums that exist. How can we take one and customize it that align with the values at the city of Omaha?
Okay. This is an outstanding discussion, and I hate to cut it off, but we're a little bit over time. So I want to really say thank you to Keith for presenting today.
Thank you.
Sobering but very cool discussion. I want to thank our sign interpreter, Jamie, who does an outstanding job. I want to remind folks that, God willing, this will be rebroadcast on Fox Channel 22, Tuesday evenings at 7. And our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for May 24th at 3:30. So with that, we're adjourned, and thanks to the members and to our audience. Much appreciated.